Welcome to the first episode of Unfiltered Shower Thoughts, where I talk about random things that are on my mind and largely unsolicited opinions. General disclaimer, this video may contain controversial and sensitive topics. If you're likely to be offended, you should probably click away and watch a cat video instead. Now let's get right into it.
So you can probably tell that the intro voice is not my voice, it's all AI. But still, welcome to the first episode of the Unfiltered Shower Thoughts. And just for today, I want to focus on sort of the landscape of essential services, as well as the perspective of working as a doctor in Australia. Another disclaimer is that I have a script in front of me, and essentially I have a shower thoughts. Then I feel like it's sort of everywhere, and I have to condense it and consolidate it in a way that is coherent. So I write it in the speech. So don't mind me if my eye contact is poor, and let's get right into it. So essentially, this is a thought I have for the past few years now, and I noticed that there is a declining perceived value of essential work or essential services, and it comes from multiple factors. So I guess to start, financially, we can observe a dramatic rise in education cost, which can be up to 100%, if not more, in the last 40 years, especially when adjusted for inflation. And yet salaries for many essential professions haven't really kept pace. So then we see many healthcare workers start their careers with substantial student debt, sometimes averaging 100,000, if not more, for medical professionals. So consequently, this debt burden compared to your starting salaries creates a challenging cost benefit equation. And we also see sort of increasing workplace challenges as well. So many healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, as well as janitors, would highlight the difficult working conditions without commensurate compensation or societal supports, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I guess even post-pandemic, healthcare workers continue to face increasing risk of burnout from high patient loads and administrative burdens. So we see that there is a notable societal and cultural shift away from essential work and towards sort of valuing high growth tech as well as financial sectors, where compensation growth is just that much better. And with sort of booming technology and AI, we have the new gig economy, as well as the option of remote work, creating new career paths that often offer more flexibility with less upfront investment and sunk cost. Alongside with the social media presence, as well as the changing career aspirations, we see how our younger generations simply don't find essential work or traditional professions to have the same appeal as they did for our parents or our grandparents. And as a result, we see then a diminishing return in pursuit of essential work, in that the traditional promise of higher education and the guarantee of a middle class lifestyle is eroding and becoming less certain. So essential workers are coming to a realization that additional education, certifications, or degrees won't necessarily translate to proportional salary increases. And even the emotional rewards of these helping professions can potentially be undermined by the systemic pressures and bureaucratic demands. So for the purpose of this topic, I'll be focusing on the perspective of healthcare workers, specifically doctors. So, but I do understand that some of the things I'll be talking about would probably be applicable to many other professions as well. So let's take a look at what it means to be a doctor and the fundamental difference between output-based compensation and time-based compensation. So in medicine, there's a shift toward productivity metrics that, such as patient volume, to evaluate the productivity of a doctor. But this actually creates a paradox in that doctors are actually seeing more patients than we did in 1980s, but they're not necessarily being compensated proportionally. Insurance reimbursements often haven't kept pace with inflation, which means that doctors need to see more patients in order to maintain the same income. And with the rise of administrative burdens, such as electronic health records, documentation requirements, insurance paperwork, this means that doctors are spending more time unpaid on non-patient care. And in contrast to this, we can see that other professions actually have proper productivity metrics and leverages. So tech workers can leverage scalable solutions by writing the code once, then deploying that same code millions of times. And financial professionals can also increase assets under management without proportionally increasing work hours. And you can also see that with many modern professions benefiting from technological leverage to multiply their output. Yet, within medicine and essential work, there is a different reality because there is a very physical and literal limit to just how many patients a doctor can safely see in a day. The quality of care often inversely correlates with the volume. So the overall sort of productivity gains that hospitals and healthcare policies try to promote often comes at a cost of burnout and reduced quality of services from individual healthcare provider. So this means that there is a fundamental economic challenge where we can see that essential service is not scaled efficiently. And yet we continue to apply these productivity metrics that are designed for scalable industries to these inherently time-intensive and human-centered professions. Again, I can't speak for everyone, and I can only make comments about the system I am working in or one that I am a little more familiar with. So hopefully I can try to help you understand just how bad it is and how difficult it can be working as a doctor in the current healthcare model. So most people don't know this, but it's expensive to be a doctor. It is an effing privilege to be a doctor. And there's compounding financial pressure to train as a doctor, and our pay does not take into consideration of these fixed costs that come with the profession. So to start, we have something called AHPRA, the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. And essentially, it's a regulatory body that ensures Australia's registered health professionals are suitably trained, qualified, and safe to practice. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I do support AHPRA in that we should have a regulatory body to make sure we are maintaining a standard of practice, and that we should always welcome the general public to speak up and provide feedback as needed. What I don't like about AHPRA is that we pay an annual registration fee that just seems to increase at an exponential rate on a yearly basis from the time we graduate. This fee can range from hundreds to over 1,000 Australian dollars, per year, regardless of whether the practitioner is working part-time or at a different level of training, from internship to consultant, which is the equivalent of an attending in North America. And it is only until recently, on 9th of December 2024, due to significant complaints of the inflated cost of AHPRA registration fee, there was a class action that managed to negotiate for practitioners to apply for 30% rebate if they have taken at least 6 months of parental, disability, or carer's leave between the year of 2024 to 2025, which will come into effect from 1st of July 2025. And literally, it felt like we had to beg for this to happen. So the best analogy of opera registration fee, which I actually found on the internet, specifically Reddit, says that picture yourself feeding this group of dogs, then asking them to bite you later on. And to make matters worse, opera complaints usually have immediate action power, which means the idea of innocent until proven otherwise does not apply here. We are guilty until proven otherwise. And this can have an extreme emotional as well as psychological toll on practitioners because the investigation and paperwork can take a long time. And so those that have experienced difficulties navigating through the opera system would be able to tell you that it was a complete torment for their mental health, and many even have thought about leaving medicine. Then we have the other side, where we have medical indemnity insurance premiums. This is a mandatory expense for all practitioners, which is unfortunately also becoming more expensive. The indemnity insurance is what doctors pay to ask to be protected under the medical legal framework. But our salary does not account for these additional fixed expenses that come with practicing medicine. And in Australia, to be part of any medical specialty training, you have to be part of a college. And that can be the College of Surgery, College of Physician Training, College of Psychiatry, Radiology, Anesthesiology, Emergency Medicine, General Practice, and so on. Given that this is technically mandatory for all doctors that choose to specialize, you would think that the cost would be somewhat reasonable. But the reality is we pay thousands to be registered as a member of the college. Then we pay additional fees to sit exams, which are increasingly difficult with high fail rates. And then we also pay the college a fee for submission of specific barrier assessments, which can also potentially be rejected by college with no refund. Now, this doesn't even include additional webinar, course, and conference fees, which again are funded by individuals, not by the college. And this creates a bit of an irony in that with all the money we are paying to be trained, why the heck are we paying all these extra fees? Beyond me, literally. It makes no sense to me. And these costs continue to rise annually, with no specific elaboration into why it has become so expensive to train as a doctor. And to help you understand in terms of how doctors are paid in Australia, for any doctor in training, we're paid as per EBA, which is the Enterprise Bargaining Agreement, EBA. And depends on your respective pay grade as a postgraduate year 1, PGY1, or PGY2, resident, registrar, or in whatever year of your training, you can expect a slight increase, typically hovering around 2 to 3% annually as you move into a new pay grade. But that is often significantly below the inflation of other fixed expenses. So essentially, we have these professional costs as overhead that we must pay regardless of our income. And to also bring the dark side of training, the pipeline burden into light, Australian medical training is uniquely long and demanding compared to other professions. Doctors in training often work extensive unpaid overtime, and the mandatory costs that I had mentioned earlier will eventually add up. Furthermore, many training positions require relocation, which means that there may be additional housing or moving cost. And the truth is, if the hospital is not able to find someone to replace your position, it sometimes feels like they just don't give a single flying fuck about whether you're an immigrant with no immediate psychosocial supports in a rural community, or if you have an established family in a suburb where relocation can be disruptive to your child's education. They don't fucking care. As long as there is a body to be staffed where it is needed, it can feel very demoralizing to come to a realization that hospitals really don't care all that much about you and your circumstances. So it's not really a surprise to me if I see another YouTube video recommended to me about doctors leaving medicine, or to just come across a headline saying that junior doctors dies by suicide. It's no brainer. It's yeah. And there's a growing number of doctor suicides. Again, you would think this should highlight the severity of the problem. In fact, research from Beyond Blue has also shown that doctors have higher rates of psychological distress than the general population. We deal with life and death. There is gravity in the liability and emotional burden that comes with the job. Yet, doctors continue to face intense pressures, working long hours with high-stake decisions and often with very limited supports. And even with mental health gaining increasing awareness, the culture of medicine often stigmatizes seeking help internally. And this is typically more prominent in competitive specialties where vulnerabilities are deemed as incompetency. And there is a fear that you will lose out on your chance of career progression if you were to speak up for fair work rights and to be openly communicative about your stress at work. So you can call me a pessimist, but I think the system is going to reach a breaking point where the financial investment and the sunk cost in becoming a doctor is increasingly difficult to justify. The emotional toll of the job is also becoming unsustainable when you are effectively working in a system that does not support their worker. Because the truth is, we are treated more as an expense to the healthcare system than we are as a valuable asset and resource. So whenever there is a need for a budget cut, junior doctors often find themselves facing this increasing barriers to claim overtime payment, and the work conditions continue to deteriorate rather than improve. And maybe I'm paranoid, but I also think there are some deeply problematic dynamics in medical training and healthcare workforce management. So to begin, again, these are just my unfiltered shower thoughts of potential conspiracies, but I think there is an artificial bottleneck strategy. And what I mean by that is that there's a contradiction of simultaneously having a consultant or specialist shortage while maintaining barriers to advancement for junior doctors. And I think in creating an artificial bottleneck, you can create a scarcity to reduce supply. And then that can maintain higher consultant wages while exploiting junior doctors or doctors in training. And this is not overtly presented, but we see that there is an increasing sort of exam difficulty and assessment barriers that sometimes appear to be more relevant to workforce control than ensuring competency. Just my opinion. And I think this is extremely toxic. If this is true, it is extremely toxic, yet clever. Because this is self-perpetuating. Those who succeed through the difficult process will wish to maintain these barriers. And I would probably feel the same way once I'm in a specialist position, because I don't want to become a consultant after all these ordeals and to, sit with massive debt, only to find that at the end I'm earning not much more than a trainee would. Yet I would have to bear increasing medical legal liabilities for any forms of mishaps. So the system will likely perpetuate in that everyone is simply protecting their own best interest. And we also see a normalization of overtime culture and the insidious framing of, requesting fair compensation as unprofessional or selfish. Patient safety may even be used as emotional leverage against fair pay requests. So the system creates a false dichotomy between caring about patients and wanting fair compensation, where in fact they shouldn't and don't contradict. I want to care for my patients and deliver the best quality of care I can provide, but I shouldn't have to feel guilty or beg to be paid for the hours I work. And I shouldn't have to be gaslighted into feeling incompetent for working overtime. And the administrative burden with the job, which is not necessarily direct patient care, but remains a vital part of our role, is often not claimable for overtime work. So it is easier for hospitals to label you incompetent than to acknowledge and address systemic workload issues. And effectively, this creates a toxic cycle where junior doctors are caught between exploitation and career progression. The system uses professional ethics and patient care as weapons against fair labor practices. And those who succeed in the system are incentivized to perpetuate it rather than reform it, and to be in a working condition where legitimate concerns are reframed as character flaws. You can see why it's so damaging. In a way, it feels like a form of emotional manipulation that takes advantage of doctors' commitment to patient care by weaponization of professionalism against fair compensation requests. So this also highlights the inherent power imbalance and structural challenges in medical advocacy, where junior doctors have a need for positive references, and that creates a form of soft coercion. And whether intentionally or unintentionally, senior doctors effectively hold career advancement opportunities hostage. The referee system becomes a tool for maintaining compliance from junior doctors, and they're forced into choosing between advocating for fair work rights and career progression. So, despite having some form of unions like the AMA or the ASMA, our system is still very broken in that we have it difficult to speak up and advocate for our rights. Then the reason is because both these sort of unions have very limited effectiveness, because unlike traditional unions, they also must balance professional advocacy with maintaining relationship with healthcare institutions. So there's a certain level of rapport that needs to be maintained while advocating for the working professionals. So that means that the professional nature of medicine makes traditional industrial action much more complicated. And we would, by default, have a weaker union representation. Again, this is further complicated by fragmentation between different levels of doctors. And that would weaken the union's collective bargaining power as well. Because an intern compared to a resident or a registrar would have different perspectives and demand for fair work rights, as well as compensation, as well as what's reasonable work hours. And those at a level of resident or registrar would also have a different take from those working as a consultant or specialist. And by and large, this creates a two-tier voice system. Those who can speak up are usually those planning to leave the system or have alternative career options. And those who have a voice are doctors with secure positions or independent practices, and those that are willing to risk their career consequences. Then we have those who feel silenced or are reluctant to speak up. And they're typically doctors in training that are requiring references for career progression. And this is particularly distinguished phenomenon in competitive specialty training programs. And of course, we have the psychosocially vulnerable groups as well, such as international medical graduates with visa dependencies. These IMGs literally are in the country at the mercy of the hospital. So they would be too fearful to advocate for themselves or even try to resist against the hospital. And we also have those that are financially vulnerable, because those that work as single parent with no additional financial supports while paying down their student loan would feel obligated to not speak up in order to maintain job security. And in a way, we then create a system where those that are most affected by the unfair work conditions are the least able to protest them. The system maintains control through career progression, gatekeeping, and reform becomes difficult because those with power to change often benefit from status quo. And the professional hierarchy then becomes a tool for maintaining workplace inequality. So this could be a reason why doctors in Australia have not gone on strike, not to the same extent as the recent South Korean doctors strike, where they had the ability to organize massive collective action through strength of their unified response and the willingness to take dramatic steps for systemic change. We're too fragmented within our workforce to bring about the same level of class action. And in my shower thoughts, as well as anxious ruminations, I sometimes wonder if we are brewing a potential healthcare crisis. With the societal shift in career preferences and the disillusionment with essential work, such as healthcare, as a doctor, I feel betrayed by the broken promise of medicine. And as an immigrant, the notion of to become a doctor is the guaranteed path to success and to be accepted in the country. That is drilled into our bones from the moment we land and move into a new country. So to then discover that the traditional bargain of medicine being a rewarding career, both emotionally and financially, being a eroding reality is tough. And the guaranteed career path just seems to have become so much more precarious. And the financial rewards as a junior doctor simply does not justify the investment. At least it doesn't feel like it's well justified. And with the evolving workplace oppression from overt bullying to systemic forms of control with more subtle yet equally damaging power dynamics, it's not uncommon to feel unheard and invisible without a right to even speak up or advocate for yourself. And so we see an ecosystem where those in power can use professional development requirements as control mechanisms. And again, it's no-brainer why so many people are leaving medicine or thinking about leaving medicine. And if not, they would have thought about quitting medicine at some point in their career. There is an appeal and aspiration to changing career with the rise of what seems to be quick success. These paths are through social media, content creation, as well as tech sectors, which seem to have greater appeal, as well as better work-life balance, flexibility for remote work, and higher initial earnings. And broadly speaking, there is a decreased willingness to commit to long training pipelines when it feels like your time and money is all going down the drain. So what does that mean for society, the future of society, I should say? The thing is, I anticipate a looming crisis in that we have an aging population with increasing comorbidities requiring increased healthcare demand. Yet this is happening in parallel to a shrinking healthcare workforce. So essentially, we're going to come to a point of growing mismatch between healthcare needs and provider availability, which is likely to result in the eventual collapse of the current seemingly sustainable healthcare delivery. And in simpler terms, touch wood, it doesn't happen, but I don't think we would have the same number of healthcare workers volunteering as tributes should there be another global scale of pandemic like the COVID-19. We simply won't have as many people wanting to come up to the front line. I don't think so. And there is a widening gap between healthcare needs and delivery capacity. And the unfortunate paradox of COVID-19 is that, in a way, that could have been an opportunity where we can transform the existing healthcare system rather than perpetuating the exploitation of essential workers. And I think there was also this weird, complex public sentiment where healthcare workers were simultaneously appreciated for what we did, yet resented for having job security during the pandemic. So in a way, this can be quite telling of how society values healthcare workers, in that we're valued more symbolically than we are materially. And the temporary acknowledgement during the pandemic crisis didn't really translate or eventuate into any lasting structural changes. And again, we will probably come to a point where the healthcare system would lose potential talent to less demanding fields, and the remaining workforce would continue to face increasing pressure of demand. And in the end, the joke is on everyone, because the quality of healthcare could deteriorate due to staffing issues. And I don't know what that would mean for a future of medicine. I don't even know if there will be enough doctors out there by the time I hit my 70s or 80s, What's going to happen then? So that's it. That's it for our first episode of the Unfiltered Shower Thoughts. It's a little morbid, but I'm just sharing my thoughts. And you're welcome to join my rant and have a civil discussion in the comment section below. Please like and share the video if you found it to be interesting or relatable, but no pressure. If you don't want to or don't feel like doing it, that's perfectly fine if you don't. I don't regularly upload, but from time to time I would have a burning desire to speak up and articulate my mind. So keep an eye out for the uploads if you like this type of content, and thank you. Over and out.